Let's now talk about the CNN Awards, and I'll start with you, Ohito, since you're one of the judges, and maybe let us know, did you feel that the CNN Awards met the expectation, especially in the CNN Journalist Award Africa? Did they meet the expectations specifically of African journalists?
Yes, there was a whole lot of very good stories across the continent, but as judges we were taken aback because normally you look at what were the big stories in Africa over the last 1 year, and you remember pretty well there were 2 or 3 stories that you can't run away. One was Ebola, which devastated the Western African countries, but had impact across Africa, including Kenya, and Kenya Airways making losses pegged to Ebola.
Again, shifting blame.
Yes, and we also had the problems of Al-Shabaab attacks on the eastern coast of Africa, and Boko Haram in the West Africa area. And generally, when we started preliminary examination of the entries, we expected to have big stories from those ends. But maybe due to the nature of the stories, we didn't quite get very telling stories from those subjects, and which made us look at other alternatives. And finally we settled on the gentleman who from Burkina Faso, who had room 143 in a high-end hotel where MPs were plotting the fall of Blaise Compaoré, who had been in power for 27 years. And I think that was very courageous. He had the right instinct, got to saw how the pot was cooking, and Compaoré is no more. That is why we settled on Sunday.
Gadara, your take on the CNN Awards?
Well, first I have to say it was quite nice to see a cartoonist winning and being recognized. So all congratulations to Mado for that. I hope in future more cartoonists will enter and be recognized. I think the stories themselves, I mean the people who won probably did deserve to win. I would be, I was watching Ohito on Monday on Nation. One of the things that I found interesting was with regard to Enoch Scolia, who won for his story on Turkana, was the idea that this was the first time the president seemed to be hearing about it, which again for me brings up questions about the values of the stories that we bring out, that we report on, and the fact that we have any follow-up after it. I mean, for him to say that the president's spokesman called him aside afterwards, asking for details. Where is this village? etc. For a story that was broadcast, I think it was in February or something last year. And after that, the president actually visited Turkana to launch the wind power project. I mean, seriously, there's what us to believe he's not been aware all this time that there's a problem with fluorosis in Lake Turkana. I find that very hard to believe, and I think that it highlights for us the fact that it's good to bring out these stories and expose them, that it's important that we follow up, that we don't just leave it at, okay, we've exposed it, forget about it, but we follow up and ask the people who are supposed to do something about it, what are they actually doing,
Okay, Dr. Buka, in regards to now the awards, the CNN Africa Journalist Awards, does it play in the fact that we did not have very many vernacular stories featured, given that it is Africa, or does that not matter, given that again it's an international platform? Should we have more vernacular stories featured?
Okay, I think before I answer that, let me just talk about what stood out for me. In their words, I was happy that there was a cartoonist who won, and I was thinking about Gadara as I saw that. So that was a big thing for me. The fact that we had different stories from what we ordinarily see in news, in everyday news coverage. A lot of stories, most of the stories that won had a lot of depth, and you see the fact that the journalists who won, their win was validated by the fact that they seemed to have spent a lot of time, researching and getting into the story. And that speaks of what does it take to be, a good and respected journalist. In terms of, Sikolia's story and the fact that, this was the first time that the president was hearing about it, I think that just goes on to confirm our existence, or the existence of media in society, that it brings out, some of those things. Of course, my question is, had he not won the award, then what would have happened, and it just points to the fact that I think it validates the job of media and in society. So whatever efforts are always put in place, to usurp its freedom and all that, I think we really need to fight that, because without media, then some of those things would not be highlighted. Without media, what happened in Burkina Faso would not have happened, and that's an important thing. But going back to your question about are we missing, vernacular, I think there's been a lot of comments about that, even on Twitter, that these were African awards, and the place of the vernacular languages was not really felt. So journalists who do stories in vernacular languages, where were they? Did they submit any entries? And if they did, then how come we are not hearing them? And if they didn't, then why is that the case? And I guess that's something that we can talk about.
Okay, I'll come to it, and maybe you'll tell us whether they actually did submit or not. But let me hear from Clay first in regards to just generally the awards.
No, normally I do tend to have reservations about these awards, because I always look forward to the time when actually we won't have to submit, when actually the judging panel will actually pick the stories on their own. But this time I didn't have a problem with the winners, basically because I think I have a soft spot for Mado. Okay, that's one. And then the story that this young man did, Sikolia, I think that was a traditional journalism story, what you'd call development journalism, because it was not this lifestyle flashy stories and all that, where somebody does, and then before it goes on air, they start calling it award-winning and stuff like that. It was a traditional journalism story, actually, which it was probably a sob story, which some of the stories I don't like, but for this particular one, it highlighted the suffering of a people who actually for decades nobody listens to them. Everybody has been talking about oil in Turkana. You've had delegations and delegations of government and all that going to that place, and this is something that they had never actually even talked about. So for me, I think that was one of the best stories. I don't remember watching it when it was aired originally, but I think when I saw it, I figured like, even if I were in that panel, it's a story that I would have picked any time. I think he did a wonderful job. It was a very good story.
Right.
Also, one more thing. Also, when it comes to the government and probably the presidency, going forward, it actually exposes the hypocrisy of the so-called of the government bodies or the executive, whereby we keep on bashing all these foreign media outlets, but until that story was actually brought to us by a foreign media outlet, that is when actually we started reacting. You see, and that also brings me to the other thing about, I don't have a problem with the winners, the guys who won this time and all that, though yes, as Ohito says, also this story about things like Ebola, it's something that actually we should have had very many entries from some of the things that affected Africa this time. We should have had very many entries. But how come, it's something that we need to ask ourselves, how come we didn't have so many of African journalists covering Ebola?
All right.
And then when it comes to this thing about now, like when I said I don't have a problem with the guys who won, I do have a problem, the hypocrisy also on us individual journalists, because for a very long time, for some time, I think in July or August, we kept on calling CNN illiterate and all that, and then now CNN was cheering, you know. So that's the bit I found also. If the hypocrisy that is showing on the government side, actually even us also, you know, as individual journalists, I think, though none of the winners, ideally none of the Kenyan winners, I never saw any tweet or any comment on them about calling social media. Calling CNN illiterate and CNN reporters illiterate and all that. And here again, when they come, they bring the show to us. We were all cheering. You know, that's what I found a little bit odd.
All right.
As for vernacular, I think they have a category for Portuguese and French. Eh? They have a category for Portuguese and French. And it's also time for the African Union, or if we have any language department or language whatever in the African Union, I think they need to probably push for Kiswahili or another African language which is widely spoken on the continent to be also included as a part of the entries, so that you don't have to do an entry and run it with subtitles, or even that you don't have to, probably even if it's print, you don't have to have it
translated for it to feature. All right, we'll come to the president's speech on that particular day, but David Ohito, in regards to vernacular, is there space for it? And like Clay is saying, is there steps to have some of those languages that, like Kiswahili, may not feature, have, you know, a spot in it?
It's been a source of great debate, and there are more Swahili speakers in Africa than there are Portuguese speakers. It was made an open-ended kind of entry. You can enter as long as you have a proper translation. But the rigmaroles of doing the right translation and vetting the entries before the panel of judges sit down, I think was bringing in a little of logistical challenges. So it's still open. You can submit your stories because it's about Africa. In fact, the statement is a story done by an African media house or a media house based here or journalist based in Africa targeting African audience. That is the basic entry minimum. So any story can still compete. So those who have held back their entries because it's in a language that may be unfamiliar to the judges are getting it wrong. I don't sit on the panel that judges preliminary works of Portuguese or French. But when they have been done, we have proper translations and we have independent verification whether the entries meet the standards, and that's how we finally take our votes on the final stories. But I want to defend the president on the case of Turkana. Held since 2013 April is a devolved function. I would have been hearing us targeting where is the governor, where is the deputy governor. I see some talking head about the deputy governor of Turkana, but I think we should direct the salvos in the right way now. The county government should have addressed the issue because they are closer to the people.
Actually, no, let's just say this, the governments, either national or county, the authorities, let's put it like the authorities should have actually
this is not a new problem.
It's not a new problem.
It's been there for a very, very long time.
After the devolution, because we've made so much noise, even the previous government, about this Turkana oil and all that. We made so much as if actually, in fact, I was expecting by probably last year we already started getting oil from Turkana, you know. There was so much noise about it, but you're going there to talk about all these things. You send delegations, international delegations, and you talk big about all this, and probably maybe they've even budgeted how much money they're going to loot from the Turkana oil. But you're not.
We've not concentrated on that. All right, and
I think that was one of the best stories of the year, and I think we need to do something to see how those. And that is just one case. There are quite a number of families actually like that in this country, by the way.
It's not a case that's isolated. I want us to go to the